First 45-minute session of free practice here at Imola, and it's great to see weather conditions so much better in this northeastern region of Italy, some 20 miles southeast of Bologna. And John, things looking very much better than they did this time. Well, actually, this is even earlier than when we started yesterday, and already the air temperature up to 15 degrees, and it never really climbed above 10 yesterday.
Well, track temperatures certainly have gone up, but the sky is clear. That cloud base that hung over the circuit all day yesterday has disappeared, and hopefully it'll be gone for the weekend. And the concern that some of the teams had over the wet weather tyre supply, and that included, of course, the intermediate tyres, appears to be now not a problem. What will be interesting to see is how soon people do go out on the track in this first of the two 45-minute sessions we have on Saturday morning. And I'm sure that teams will want to get out as quickly as possible to check out and decide which of the new Michelin or new Bridgestone tyres they're going to prefer, because both companies have brought new tyres as well as existing tyres to this event, and teams need to know that information as soon as possible. But of course, once again, we've got a green track. A lot of work will be done by the teams this morning once they get out onto those dry weather tyres.
Well, all that work to be done. We're taking a quick look through the points at the moment. The Williams BMW leading the Constructors' Championship at the moment by 6 points over Ferrari. But Michael Schumacher, of course, leading the Drivers' Championship by some 8 points over his brother Ralph, and 10 points over the man we spoke to just a moment ago, Juan Pablo Montoya. Two F2002, in fact 3 F2002 chassis here this weekend for Ferrari, a car each for Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello, and the spare this weekend. So that 2001 car that proved so effective in the early races, well, that's now been put into retirement, and it's all about the brand new Ferrari, which, looking at what happened here yesterday, is an extremely rapid motor car.
Yes, Rubens Barrichello had the benefit of doing an additional 13 minutes of running when track conditions were generally improving, not by a great margin, but nonetheless were improving. As we saw, Michael stuck it into the mud up at the very anti-alta, spun the car, then had a little discussion with the trackside marshal as to what he should do, where he should go. Michael then sort of made a bit of an issue of it, I think maybe more or less to disguise the fact that he had just dropped it simply. And once the race director tells a marshal, or the marshal's advised what a driver should do, then there's no discussion or argument about it. And I think it was maybe just a little bit of sandbagging on Michael's part.
As ever, memories very strong here of Ayrton Senna, who lost his life here in 1994. It was a track in which he dominated in qualifying in particular, and at one stage he had 7 pole positions in a row. Astonishing. He actually scored 8 poles in 10 races. He was really the king of qualifying here at Imola.
But what was most impressive, I think, in those pole positions was during the days of the turbocharged cars, the 1.5 litre, the V6s turbocharged, something like, well, in some days 1200 horsepower. Watching Ayrton Senna on a qualifying lap, I mean, coming into the chicane prior to the pits, it was just, I tell you, that car was dancing on the tarmac, and something that I will never forget, and I'm sure those that were here in those days also would recall with a tear in their eye.
We're looking in the Williams pit at the moment, but down at the other end of the pit lane, the Minardi team, Peter Windsor has caught up with Mark Webber.
Yes, Mark, you were going pretty well in the wet yesterday until the engine lost oil pressure, so there's a lot of talk about the Michelins. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, it's a very special circuit in terms of, the very low temperature. It's an old surface here, so it's very hard to generate much grip and heat in the tyres to start with. So it's probably clear that the other guys have got a bit of an advantage in terms of grip in Bridgestone, but, we've had our advantages in the past, so this is what Grand Prix racing's about.
Minardi this year covering a lot of race laps, very good reliability, obviously an engine failure yesterday, but how do you account for that reliability?
It's something which they've worked very hard on just down the road here in Faenza, so the guys are quality control, looking at making sure that they get to the bottom of the problems very early, and it's something that's important because track time is information's ultimately speed in the end, so they're working very hard, and for a small team they're one of the best teams in the pit lane, there's no question about it.
Does it feel like an Italian team this weekend?
Yeah, it's got a bit more Italian flavour to it this weekend for sure. A lot of Italian guests, and we had the cake 2 days ago for 275 Grand Prix this weekend for us. So yeah, it's a big weekend.
Well, very best of luck for the rest of the weekend.
Thanks.
Very close to Faenza, of course, the place where the cars are designed and built, and Research and development work goes on in the UK as well, but it's certainly staying Italian by all accounts. Paul Stoddart saying, no, they're definitely going to keep this base in Faenza in Italy. Another famous Italian just walking down the pit lane, Flavio Briatore, boss of the Renault team. And there you can see temperature up to 15 degrees, air temperature, and track temperature much, much higher already at this early time in the morning, 5 to 9 local time, and already it's up to 17 degrees.
Well, I'm delighted to see the temperature rising, but I'm not very happy about that big half the sky now, a cloud base, and that's low. It's not a high cloud base. I just hope that that stays away. There doesn't appear to be too much wind around to help this drying process. You can see there the trees in the background. There's not much movement, so that may be good for some factors, and hopefully it'll not blow in that cloud as we look at McLaren's communication centre, something that you probably see in House and Garden and think it was a very modern design and a bit small for Ron and his family these days, but nevertheless fulfills its objectives, 3 objectives covered under one roof.
Yeah, we looked at this in more detail yesterday in our coverage, but basically this is the new McLaren motorhome, inverted commas, in fact replacing 3 motorhomes belonging to the team and the engine builder and the sponsors. Normally they would park up 3 separate motorhomes. Now McLaren have decided to put it all into one edifice, if you like, and this is it. And this is the new McLaren Communications Centre. A very impressive place it is, although apparently the roof was leaking yesterday in the rain.
Well, there would be somebody who would find that out. I mean, you can imagine Ron Dennis brought this brand new facility to the circuit. I mean, high tech is not enough to describe it. And then something as fundamental as a water leak, and then of course the whole pit lane would find that highly amusing. It's sort of rather negative of those that seem to think it was rather funny, I think.
Well, it's interesting to see the battle continues off the track just as much in Formula One as it does on the track. It hasn't been the ideal start to the season for the McLaren Mercedes team, but David Coulthard getting on the podium last time out in Brazil, at least getting some points on the board, so let's hope that they have a good run. In fact, yesterday, not going badly in those wet conditions. Nobody had a chance to catch Ferrari. They were dominant yesterday, it has to be said. Fisichella was best of the rest for Jordan, so a good day for them. But remember, he's on Bridgestone tyres as well, and the fastest of the Michelin users, David Coulthard and Kimi Räikkönen. So good to see that the McLarens were going very quickly in that free practice session yesterday. Now I think Amy Lewis has something for us.
Giancarlo Fisichella, yesterday you set the 3rd fastest time in absolute horrendous wet conditions. Today the sun's shining. Are you hoping it's going to rain again so you can continue your performance?
Yeah, but today I think it's going to be like that, and it's more difficult for us to be in the top 6. Even if we have a little step, a better step on engine, but I think we have to be realistic, and it's going to be difficult to be in top 10 today.
I think, Ben, one of the things that Jordans were looking forward to and other teams in Bridgestones, because particularly Arrows, BAR and Jordan have not scored any points this year, and because Bridgestone seemed to have an advantage in those cold, wet conditions yesterday, the chance of them being up the grid if it had been a wet qualifying was very real indeed. And by starting further up the grid, it gives you more choices, more options, and teams like Jordan and BAR and Arrows, desperate to get onto the points ladder, they can't allow themselves not to score points. And as the season progresses, it becomes increasingly difficult to pick up points, because the top 3 teams are generally going to dominate the top 6 positions in the field.
Absolutely, yes. Then we'll see that throughout the course of the season. There you can see the dampness on circuit at the moment, but with the higher temperatures it should dry off much more quickly than it did yesterday. It took forever. In fact, it didn't really dry off in the second session, despite there being no extra rain. The cold temperatures meant it stayed greasy and very slippery, and only 1 or 2 cars managed to improve in the second free practice. Today I think we'll see the track drying out a great deal more quickly. Just to quickly run through what happened in terms of times yesterday. The 2 Ferraris at the top, the Jordan and Fisichella, the 2 McLarens. Frentzen went well, as you mentioned, for Arrows, and then Jarno Trulli, he had a spin out of the final chicane, did a little bit of damage, but was 7th fastest yesterday. Felipe Massa was looking good for Sauber, ahead of Montoya and Ralf Schumacher, and then we saw Sato, Heidfeld, Irvine in 13th, Button in 14th, and then Villeneuve, De La Rosa. Panis was 17th, so the BAR still struggling somewhat, ahead of Bernaldi. Webber, who we talked to a moment ago, he was 19th yesterday, ahead of Mika Salo, Alex Young and Alan McNish. And as the session is just about to get underway in a few seconds time, we can see a number of cars all getting ready to come out onto the track, and quite a few people using some intermediates, or in fact Panis looks like he's on new intermediates. The others are on scrubbed wet tyres they used yesterday for these initial exploratory laps.
Yeah, it'll be very much a lap, go out, run, maybe do 2 or 3 laps, but there's no real point in doing it. You get a lap, a look at the circuit, and come back in, and then whether you want to sit it out or whether you've got some more work that you need to do regardless of conditions or tyres that you're going to use. And we'll see that very quickly. There's already 5 cars out on circuit: Ralf Schumacher, Villeneuve, Irvine, Young and Panis.
Yes, taking an early look at the track itself. We're coming through the Tamburello chicane down towards the Villeneuve chicane. These chicanes were added, of course, after the tragic events of 1994, and there's talk of the track changing for next year. Some £5 million due to be spent to straighten out a couple of these areas, in fact, and hopefully improve opportunities for overtaking.
Well, there's the reason Takuma Sato is on wet weather tyres. As they climb up to the Piratella, you can see there's still enough water to cause spray to come off those wet weather tyres. And while some teams might think, oh, we'll send them out in intermediates, there is still sufficient water out there to catch the unwary. Those that have still got a bit of sleep in their eyes. Relatively early start for all the teams. It's a 9 o'clock start in Imola. So, just very easy to make a little error and completely ruin a 45-minute session. And then you start to get into that countdown where things start to get away from you. Time runs away from you. You can't get your car back off the circuit until the end of the session. There's only half an hour between the 2 sessions. And then that next 45-minute session is crucial prior to going into qualifying.
Some changes to the Honda engine this weekend, and that's what we've emailed Jordan about, and they've said increased performance throughout the rev range, and we gather actually slightly higher revs being used, and of course higher revs equates to higher power these days, and they're hoping for slightly better things. Good performance yesterday in the wet, but we'll have to see whether that performance is repeated in the dry. David Coulthard was reasonably happy yesterday. Michelin's tyres in the wet certainly much closer to Bridgestone than they were last year, and Pierre Dupasquier saying yesterday, well, at least the drivers aren't complaining that they're driving on ice, that they were last year. They complained it was like driving on ice on Michelin wet tyres. It's slightly better this time, but the Bridgestone's still the advantage.
But of course you saw David Coulthard in that Friday second part of the session come into the pits with the right front tyre heavily grained. We actually could see it on the track. There's a very definitive black line around the middle of the tyre. So Coulthard staying as long as possible on the wet weather Michelin before even thinking about going across to the intermediate. But the problem was, and there are those intermediates on the Michelin, on the McLaren, the problem was for Coulthard, if that was a race situation, he is, or Raikkonen's car, it is mitigating his choice to what he might do or choose to do, or what Michelin might be able to allow them to do.
Yes, and the battle between the two tyre companies so intense at the moment. In fact, there was a press conference yesterday with Bridgestone and Ferrari talking about how close their working relationship is. Ross Brawn talking about it in detail. There are actually Bridgestone people based permanently at Ferrari now, and Ferrari people based in Tokyo, working together so much on the development of the tyres, and it's the whole concept. So the design process of the car works hand in hand with the design process with the tyres, at least for Ferrari and Bridgestone.
Yes, but on the other hand, for Michelin, for McLaren and Williams, the Michelin's approach and ability to respond quickly is just unbelievable. They can come up with concepts and go from concept to production in like 24 hours, 48 hours. It is unbelievable. That is the one advantage that certainly Michelin has over its competitor Bridgestone.
Now look at this once again. We've got the view looking into Michael Schumacher's visor, and it's not quite as clear as yesterday because he's got a slightly tinted visor with the sunshine out, but we can still get a great view here. Absolutely rivaled coverage on Digital F1. You are riding with 4-time world champion Michael Schumacher, and you can watch him at work in the early stages of morning free practice here at Imola.
And really what Michael Schumacher has is time. He's got so much time for everything that's going on around him. His eyes, to me, don't look quite so relaxed as he was yesterday afternoon, but this is an outlap, and of course he was driving into the sun, still not all that high in the sky. You could see him almost squinting as he drove into the sun, back into the pits, of course, just to have a quick look around the car, which is fairly standard practice for teams. They go out, do that one lap, and he'll assess whether it's worth continuing. There will be a programme of work that Ross Brawn and the Ferrari team will have laid out for these 2 45-minute sessions. But it's very much a question of whether Michael feels they are going to benefit very much from processing in these conditions. You can see those intermediate Bridgestones relatively dry, and that's hopefully a good indication for everybody.
Michael Schumacher, one of 3 drivers to have taken back-to-back victories here. He's had 3 wins in all, but had back-to-back victories for Ferrari in 1999 and in 2000, joining Ayrton Senna, who won in 88 and 89, and Damon Hill, who also scored back-to-back victories at this Imola circuit in 1995 and 1996. So Michael always goes well here. Hasn't had that many pole positions, but it's the race that counts. And there you can points table. We were talking about that a moment ago, and the fact that Jenson Button, of course, is best of the rest after Ferrari and Williams BMW with his 4 points, or 6 points that he's scored so far. Looking further on down the list, Eddie Irvine down in 7th place, and those points, of course, were scored in the first Grand Prix in Australia, but the Jaguar hasn't basically been on the pace of most of the front runners throughout the season.
Well, most people will be either going out on the intermediates or staying in the pits until they feel it's dry enough to go out on the groove slicks. Because one of the regulations say, with the exception of race day, wet weather tyres may only be used after the track has been declared wet by the race director. And looking at the track conditions, I would certainly say they cannot be declared to be wet conditions. So far we have not seen anybody out on wets. By that judgment, I have to say the track has not been declared a wet track.
No, that's right. It's damp, but it's certainly nothing like we saw yesterday. We saw a lot of standing water on the track yesterday for the free practice sessions, and they were certainly splashing their way around. We saw a lot of incident, John, but thankfully not too much damage done. I think Jarno Trulli probably was the only one who actually did any damage to the car.
Yeah, I think more damage was done to pride and ego as quite a number of drivers, I think the Williams most notably, Ralf Schumacher and Pablo Montoya spent an enormous amount of time facing every direction, but that they should have been facing. And whether they came with a car which was set up distinctly for dry weather conditions, or whether they just were maybe too ambitious in some of the areas they were trying to find performance from. But the car looked very tricky. It seemed as if the drivers weren't able to commit in particularly somewhere like Acqua Minerale, or as they rise out of Acqua Minerale coming up to the Variante Alta, the corner that we saw Ralf Schumacher off, I think at least twice, if not 3 times, and Montoya probably twice as well.
Yes, they were certainly throwing the car around all over the place and running onto the grass here, there and everywhere. Rubens Barrichello had a reasonably untroubled time in the new car, as we mentioned earlier on, his first race event in the 2002, and in fact it was his first opportunity to drive it in the wet yesterday, although he has done a reasonable amount of testing in the new car. Up to now, all that testing's been in dry conditions, so he was just getting used to it, liked the feel of it, said that there was quite a big sweet spot. They could really work on the car, get it handling well in those conditions, and we always know that Rubens goes well when the track is slippery, and he enjoyed himself, setting the second fastest time yesterday.
Well, Rubens Barrichello also very disappointed in his season to date, hasn't scored a single point, and his teammate Michael Schumacher on 24, I mean, for Rubens, it's going to be a mountain to climb if he wants to say or feel that he has got the same level of ability. He believes that he is as good as Michael Schumacher, certainly better than he's seemingly being seen with 0 points at the minute. Yeah,
he was unfortunate in Brazil, of course. He was running light in the race, but got in the lead. He might not have won the race, unlikely to have done, but he should have had a good result. But another mechanical problem putting him out. David Coulthard pushed back into the McLaren garage.
And just getting a glimpse of the right front. I think maybe it was more the way the water reflected on the tyre. I thought it was some, so it's just the way the water was picking up. There's dry and damp patches on the tyre and was causing sort of slightly unusual distortions, and I thought maybe that was a sign of abnormally high wear, but in fact all it was just the damp and dry patches.
In the Jaguar pit now with Pedro de la Rosa and Eddie Irvine both sitting. You can see Eddie just in the background of the picture there, both waiting for the right opportunity to come on track. The track still wet at the moment, and still a chance of rain today, some 30% chance we gather of rain falling today, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Jaguar, are you experiencing any handling problems, we asked them, and they said, well, yes, still a lack of grip. Aerodynamic grip is their main concern, not getting the downforce from the bodywork shape and from the wings front and rear. Their new wind tunnel is operating now, but it does take quite a lot of time before any improvements from the wind tunnel can be put onto the car.
Yes, that's right, and of course really there's no big change in the Jaguar from Brazil, and in Brazil they were basically fairly happy with the balance of the car in the low speed parts of the circuit, the parts that really are the mechanical bits, not dissimilar in fact to Imola, and Imola has probably got fewer high speed corners, so they shouldn't be any worse off relative to the rest of the field than they were in Brazil, and they sort of qualified just outside the top 10, I think 11th and 13th. So if they can get on the grid in those positions, and with the reliability that they have, this is a hard circuit on gearboxes, on brakes, and sometimes on engine. So if they can finish, they might sneak another point, but it's a very, very long shot.
Track temperature staying fairly constant at the moment. In fact, it's dropped a fraction or two since we started looking at those temperatures a while ago. There is Pierre Dupasquier of Michelin, and I'm sure that he'll be keen to see the temperatures coming up a little bit. It seems to suit them very well when it gets nice and hot, although Bridgestone feel that they're very much on a par with Michelin no matter what the temperatures are. And in Brazil it was hot, and Bridgestone came out the winner, of course, with Michael Schumacher. But this rivalry between the two tyre manufacturers adding another degree of interest in Formula One this year.
And Pierre Dupasquier, he's wishing the track would dry. He's almost going out there and saying, please get dried as quickly as possible. They have brought with them a new compound that I believe has not been used, has not been available to everybody to try, which they believe will be more appropriate to the lower early European season temperatures than those that we've seen, for example, in Malaysia and Brazil, where clearly it was very, very hot in the 30s above, and here we are just basically getting into the teens. So he wants to get one of his cars out as quickly as possible on those dry weather tyres to see whether they've made progress or where they will be in relation to the competitors.
The track surface, quite an old one, as Mark Webber was telling us a little while earlier in this broadcast, and interestingly it is fairly low grip, and it means that they run a fairly soft compound of tyre here. So both Bridgestone and Michelin will have brought a relatively soft dry weather tyre to try and get the best performance and still get the consistency in the race itself. Ralf Schumacher just coming out of the Williams BMW pit, and the Ferrari guys keeping a close eye there on what's going on.
Yeah, he said, I was out on the set of intermediates. There's only one compound in the intermediate. There are two choices of compound in the full wet. But right now, nobody on those full wets. They will be on that intermediate, which is a harder compound than either of the two full wet tyres. But of course, it's also probably slightly softer than that we used for the full race, what we call slick, but the groove slick tyre.
Coming past the spectator banks up on the right-hand side, out of Tosa there, a lot of people gathering already up there to watch this free practice. Through Piratella, we're riding with Giancarlo Fisichella, dropping downhill now to Acqua Minerali. Second part of this, slow second gear, climbing back up the hill, hard on the power. Past another group of grandstands on the outside of the corner. Good place to watch, and we've seen incident aplenty there in the past, one or two spinning yesterday. This was the corner that caught out a number of drivers, including Michael Schumacher. That's the Barriente Alta, the top chicane. Now they head back downhill. This is actually the highest speed section of the track, up to nearly 195 miles an hour in the full dry conditions there before braking, and into the left-handers at Rivazza.
They're just catching up to Mika Salo. Fisichella taking the long way round, Salo taking the regular racing line, and the Toyotas yesterday had a terrible day, not able to go anywhere near the level of performance we've seen in the first three races. 20th for Salo, 22nd for McNish. So Fisichella ran down Mika Salo pretty quickly in that last third of a lap. Now under acceleration you see the difference between Toyota power and Honda power, and this is the upgraded version of the Honda engine. That's the first time they've actually run it this weekend. For yesterday's practice times they ran basically the engine they've been using so far this year, certainly the engines that they used in Brazil.
That was Michael Schumacher just joining onto the track, by the way. You saw that third car just coming out of the pit lane there as they went through. That was Schumacher in the Ferrari. Kimi Räikkönen getting ready to come out, but with Michael out on track, Peter, I think you found yourself outside the Ferrari pit once again.
Yeah, I can't stay away from here, Ben. It's where the action is, of course. Michael's gone out on a new set of wets, and one can only imagine him thinking, I wish more guys were out there drying up the track, because everybody, of course, wants to get on with it and run the dry tyres, but they've got to get a dry groove. I'm almost surprised Ferrari haven't been down to Minardi and their mates and decided to buy them dinner if they all go out and dry the track for them. But anyway, Michael's given up waiting, and he's out there trying to get a dry groove going.
Great to see it. The temperature's coming up a bit. The sunshine looks pretty bright down there, so prospects look good.
Absolutely, as you can see, jackets off now, and it's a beautiful, beautiful spring morning here in Italy.
Great news. Well, we're watching Ralf Schumacher out on track as well at the moment, and Fisichella looking quick at the moment. Olivier Panis has just put in the third fastest time, and Takuma Sato, in fact, has just gone fastest in the Jordan in this early stages. 1 minute 35.9, and that's already faster than yesterday.
Yes, it is. In fact, Fisichella was the first person to beat Michael Schumacher's time from Friday, and now Fisichella has done it again, down to 34.741. Sato second, Panis third, and Mika Salo still in the 40s. He's fourth quickest. So clearly the track much quicker than it was yesterday. These are times done on intermediate tyres. and the grip levels are coming up literally by the corner, not even by the lap.
Well, that dry line quickly developing, and these higher temperatures helping that to happen. Fisichella has just gone fastest again, 134.741, ahead of his teammate Takuma Sato. We haven't seen the Jordans heading the timesheets much this year, John, but at the moment things are looking a little more promising. Let's just hope they can stay up there once it does get fully dry. Across the line goes Ralph, and he goes third.
Yes, this is going to be interesting to see. It's the first time we've seen a Williams really running an anger this weekend. Ralph was only 10th quickest in the session on Friday, and Montoya wasn't really much happier in 9th place. So there is Michael Schumacher's prize on that full wet tyre. Now, whether they should not be on those unless it's been declared a full wet track or a wet session.
Yes, but I think they won't be on there for much longer. They'll change those over fairly quickly and put them on to intermediates or indeed groove tyres. We're about 10 seconds a lap at the moment off a full dry weather time, so that much. When you get to within about 10 seconds of a dry weather time, usually you'll start to see one or two drivers making the switch, but it is still quite greasy. Nobody wants to make a silly mistake at this point and throw the car off the road, so you may see them staying on inters for a little longer.
Well, I think the intermediate tyre is the right tyre for the moment, partly because of ambient temperatures not being that warm, although they are coming up at 18 on track now and 15 ambient temperatures, so an improvement on Friday, but nevertheless it's still going to take traffic on the track to encourage a drying line to appear sooner than later. And everybody wants to get out as quickly as possible, but nobody wants to be the person to go out and do the running.
On board here with Kimi Räikkönen in the McLaren. First year for him at this team, of course. Last year he raced here for Sauber, and as we mentioned yesterday, he had that scary accident when the steering wheel came loose. Wasn't fully attached to the steering column. Watch him down here in towards Piratella. Look at the speed there. Great shot that of just how fast they come down that hill under the bridge before they break into Rivazza.
It's a massive part of the circuit, and you come down under the bridge and you get on the brakes really hard. You've got to slow the car down. It's quite a steep decline. You've got to get the speed off for the first part of Rivazza, tuck the car in, then let the car float out to the side of the track, and then make your second apex for part two. And Räikkönen, well, he's now the quickest of the Michelin runners in 4th place.
Yes, and Frentzen to second, so it's now Fisichella fastest. He improved his time slightly further, but it's now Frentzen in the Arrows who's come up to second, Sato third, and this man Räikkönen in 4th, just getting through the Tamburello chicane down towards the Villeneuve corner now.
And in fact, Frentzen currently still the quickest man on the track. He's quickest through that first sector. So the Arrows team taking a little bit of time to see the full potential of this new car. Certainly the speed is there. It's a question of whether the reliability or the consistency can match it.
Yes, they had not really done any testing so far this year, just a little bit before the first Grand Prix, but they are seemingly getting a handle on the car a little more. We're watching the Jordan of Fisichella. He is fastest now in this session. You can see the intermediate tyres there. They seem to be working well in these drying conditions, but surely we're going to see people moving on to the grooved dry weather tyre fairly quickly. Try and listen up on the radio. We're not really getting much from that at the moment. We'll try and listen into more conversations as we go through the course of the morning, but not always getting quite clear communication, certainly not in that case. Now, Frentzen, as you said, John's on a good lap here. Let's see whether this one puts him fastest. No, he stays second fastest, as you see, 0.6 of a second slower than Fisichella.
Yes, he was quickest in that first sector, then it was a regular time in the second, and then it was nothing special in the third. And it was in fact funny on Friday that we saw Michael Schumacher, when he went out on the intermediates, he picked up all the time on that final sector, and it was in the first and second sectors where he was slightly struggling to find grip. But Frentzen found the grip in that first sector. Now it's Jacques Villeneuve. He's the man who's gone quickest again, a Bridgestone tired car. He's quickest in that first sector, so we look to see whether Villeneuve can find any further improvement on his 12th place.
Yeah, the time's improving all the time. Panis has just popped up to 4th position, and as the track dries, just whoever's out there really is going faster all the time. But it's good to see the track getting better. Under the trees there, John, down into Acqua Minerale, that might take a fraction longer to dry off, and Frentzen just getting it a little bit out of shape through the tighter part as well.
Yes, we've got about half the field in the pits, and well, just over half the field in the pits, and the remaining out on track. We need to get a lot more cars out, but this is the problem. Nobody really wants to go out. They're going to not waste laps, but they might waste tyres. They want to keep back in the event that Sunday is a wet race, and they want to have as many sets of intermediates as available as possible. If that's the tyre of choice for those conditions. Frenzen's backed off now, whether he's not satisfied with that lap. He put a personal best in that second sector, but he's just backed off. Whether he's coming into the pits, I suspect it looks like he is.
Villeneuve has come up to second position now. He's 4/10 of a second slower than Fisichella. So it's now Fisichella, Villeneuve, Frentzen, Sato, Panis, Raikkonen, our top 6 in these early stages of Saturday morning free practice. Frentzen himself, a former winner here at Imola when he was driving for Williams. In fact, he led home the first ever German drivers 1-2. He beat Michael Schumacher that day, and it was the first time German drivers had finished 1-2 in the World Championship. So he knows his place well, and that's all looking very exciting for Felipe Massa as he climbs up the hill. Car all over the place.
Whoa, certainly over the curbs there. I mean, that was aggressive. He didn't just ride the curb, he went at it with the entire car. Kept the car in control all the way down into the Ravazza.
That's a great shot. I love that picture, that shot as they come under the bridge. And as
so quick down into there as well.
It's so fast, and you're coming into a 90-degree left. You're heading down that hill at about 190 miles an hour, and you just got a wall in front of you, basically, because it's a 90 left.
That's when you really do trust in your brakes. You come down the hill after a hard lap, the brakes have been used. You want to make sure you've got a good firm pedal. There's been no knock-off. That's something that happens when the pads get pushed back by the pistons, the vibrations. So you want to make sure you've got plenty of pedal when you hit the brakes. Once again, Jacques Villeneuve in 4th place, quickest in that first intermediate, personal best in the second. So Villeneuve and Panis in the other BAR. Panis 3rd, Villeneuve 4th, and Villeneuve in fact stays in 4th place.
Well, Massa went second. Look at that, just a fraction off Fisichella's time with that previous lap. He's looking very confident, and I think he's on a bit of a mission here this weekend because he knows this track well. Unlike the other Grand Prix tracks that we've been to so far this year, where he's had to do all the learning on the Friday and the Saturday morning, this place he knows well. He won in Euro Formula 3000 here last year. So Felipe Massa, I think he's very fired up, wants to beat not only his teammate but get that Sauber up as far as possible on the grid today.
And Enrique Bernoldi in the second of the arrows. He's currently in 8th place, just behind the first of the Michelin runners. That's Kimi Raikkonen. And then you got behind Bernoldi, you got the 2 Renaults of Button and Trulli running out the top 10.
And well, as we watch the times just gradually improving, if you had a look at the onboard channel at the moment, you can ride with Massa and see just how hard he's attacking. I have to say, Felipe, maybe it'd be sensible to just take your time at the moment. In fact, the onboard channel switched to Bernoldi. We're taking a look at Massa. He's pushing very hard. This perhaps, John, where a rookie driver, a novice driver, just sometimes needs to temper it with patience, because being the fastest in Saturday morning free practice is not going to do you any favours at the end of the day.
Well, he is quickest after all, and I'm sure he'll remember this moment in his Grand Prix career, the first time I think he's actually topped. And look how close he gets to the edge of the track. I just wonder how much vision he has. He's quite a short little guy. He sits low on the car, and with a full face helmet on, there's bits of the track I'm sure he's not seeing, and he's just sort of aiming the car. But Villeneuve has in fact just eclipsed Massa. That lasted about 10-12 seconds. So Jacques Villeneuve 122.7.
Massa's been off. Well, no great surprise there, the way he was going. And he's very talented, but Felipe, just save yourself for qualifying. That's when it counts. Don't throw the car off the road now, because then you'll really mess up your qualifying attempt later on.
But just look at how low he sits in the car. And in some parts of the circuit now, as you climb uphill, you're going to be driving very shortly into the sun, which will even further inhibit. Let's look again as he says, just never in a month of Sundays. He might have thought he was another part of the racetrack, but he was never going to make the right-hander in that Villeneuve chicane.
He looked like he was heading for the airport of Bologna there, rather than trying to get around to the Tosa hairpin that was coming up next. So Felipe Massa gets away with it, and now Villeneuve has eclipsed his time, as you said, John. Fisichella's been pushed back to 3rd. Panis is going quite well. Interesting to see the 2 BARs up there. They, I don't think they'll feature once the track dries out. They were both complaining again yesterday that the car, not only slightly down on power perhaps, the Honda engine not producing quite as much as some of the others, but they reckon that the aerodynamics of the car not good either.
But in these conditions, maybe the aerodynamics are not just quite as critical, and it's a little bit more on the mechanical side of the car that's coming into play. The car is still not as fully loaded as it would be when you're running on dry tyres, particularly doing your pre-qualifying runs and then going into qualifying. And it's very often the case that cars that aren't quite as competitive in full dry conditions appear to flatter themselves in these sort of half and half conditions. Drivers are slightly less committed entering corners than not, apart from, of course, Felipe Massa, but this is with Heidfeld. So you feel that as conditions improve, track temperature rises, track dries out, you will see the usual suspects filtering all the way up to the top 10 places.
So Nick Heidfeld then, the more experienced teammate to Felipe Massa. And Nick's certainly very, very rapid. He knows he'll have a tough time on his hands this weekend from Massa, who's so determined to show what he can do on a track he knows well. But Nick's got that extra experience. He's done 36 Grand Prix now. Might not be a huge amount, but there he's gone 5th fastest straight away. And he certainly knows about saving up the big effort for qualifying. Villeneuve fastest, as we mentioned a moment ago. He's back in the pits, and not many cars out on track at the moment. Heidfeld, Barrichello, Mika Salo is out there, so's Bernoldi, and David Coulthard too.
Yes, Coulthard just comes out of the Tosa hairpin bend, climbs up. That was Kimi Raikkonen's car he went past. So into Pierretella. Quite a lot of, a bit of a quick movement in the hands for David Coulthard. I think he probably felt that through his backside, then his hands reacted almost as quickly.
Another great view here. Oh, and again you can see the correction. Can't quite see his eyes, sadly, with the sunshine now, but still a great view into the face of David Coulthard, who took pole position here last year and beating his teammate Mika Hakkinen to that pole slot 12 months ago. I wonder if he's going to be able to challenge this year. It doesn't seem likely on the performance that we've seen from the McLarens so far this season, but they have 4 times been on pole in the last 4 years at Imola.
But Rubens Barrichello currently 14th. He's the fastest car again on circuit, quickest through that first intermediate by, well, about 0.2 of a second. And we're still watching David Coulthard as he scythes his way through that final chicane and comes across start-finish line, goes 8th. Barrichello now fastest. We're watching Rubens. He's just gone through that second intermediate again, fastest of the day to date. Drops down into the Ravazza.
Yeah, let's watch it down through the left-hander. Just use a bit of curb, but doesn't even have to correct it. So the car seems to ride the curb well, and that's part of the trick of getting a quick lap out of a car here at Imola when it's dry, is making it ride the curbs well. Bouncing through the last chicane now. Heidfeld has gone P1, but it won't be for long, as Barrichello now goes fastest and by nearly a second over Nick Heidfeld in the Sauber.
And the Ferrari did look very, very good indeed as he came through the Ravazza. As you could see the level of grip that Barrichello's enjoying again as he exits out through the Tamburello chicane, not using anywhere near as much of the road as other people who are not even going as quick as Barrichello. That indicates that they've got those intermediate tyres up to operating temperature. That's where the grip's coming from, and as long as he doesn't drive through too many of the wet parts of the track and can find the drier bits, he'll be able to maintain that performance.
Looks like De La Rosa getting ready to come out. He hasn't done a timed lap as yet. He's done 1 installation lap, just waiting for the track to dry off somewhat. And they're getting ready to put him out.
Yeah, it said on that tyre front dry. Now that indicates he's going to go out on a set of groove slicks, not on a set of intermediates. So maybe a marginal... Oh, look at the sliding, just throwing the car around. Kimi Raikkonen again, familiar with these type of conditions, not at all afraid to let the back of the car drift around. That's, I think, where the difference in the driving styles of Coulthard and Raikkonen really focuses. David likes a car that gives him more security in the rear. Raikkonen's prepared to let the rear do whatever it likes as long as he's got the front end of the car planted.
Yes, he goes 7th fastest with that time. David Coulthard 10th fastest with his first flying lap. Still Barrichello, Heidfeld, Villeneuve, Massa, Fisichella and Panis. And Williams BMW just waiting their moment. Nobody in a rush at this stage to do anything special in this free practice session. Still waiting for the track to fully dry, and we're still some 6 or 7 seconds off the pace of full dry weather conditions. So still some work to be done here. Track temperatures dropped slightly, if anything. We're right on board with Michael Schumacher.
It's not just dropped, it's plummeted. It's gone from 18 down to 12.
Yeah, that's a surprise. The cloud cover coming in a little more, and that's cooling conditions down again. And now here we come down towards, this is that fast section we were talking about, under the bridge. There he flashes by.
And he's quickest in that second intermediate. So Schumacher on his first proper attempt this morning to do a flying lap. Oh, again, just shows you how marginal the grip is. Using the throttle as early as possible, but paying the price.
But that car looks so controllable. A quick flick of opposite lock and it's all back together again. It doesn't seem to react in a bad way at all. And Michael goes fastest by just under a second again. The same advantage that Barrichello had over Heidfeld a moment ago. Oh, and Montoya getting it a little bit out of shape. But we've got the view on board with him. Meanwhile, Peter, what can you tell pit lane?
Well, I'm in a fantastic position here at the entrance to the pit lane. Just see a nice shot of DC coming in there. I mean, up here watching the chicane, listening to your comments, of course, and John's absolutely right. The difference in style between Kimi Räikkönen and David Coulthard very marked as they break into the chicane. One of the great things about watching a corner rather than watching it on television is looking at the same place and then seeing the different cars past that point on using different parts of the track, if you see what I mean. Usually a television camera follows the car. And David turns in much earlier than Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen on the power, using the back end much more than DC. Just while we hear some radio there.
Just trying to listen into the Williams radio, but I don't think we're getting much from there actually at the moment, Peter.
No. And the other point I just wanted to make was when it was quite slippery, it was very interesting to hear how much traction control some engines and cars were using compared with others. The Williams BMWs were sort of off-song and fluffy, in other words, with the traction control operating for about 100 metres out of the chicane here, whereas the Ferraris, I dare say, were about 30 metres of traction control in use.
Well, that certainly shows you how well the whole car tyre combination is working out of that corner. If the Ferraris are able to go to full power effectively that much earlier than the Williams BMWs. Both cars out on track at the moment. Michael Schumacher is fastest, just set a faster first segment time that last time around, but the overall lap was slightly slower.
But look at the exit of that Tambora Montoya, the whole car, the back of the car just drifting out under throttle. He's probably reduced the percentage of traction control to try and find a bit more speed, try and get traction out of the tyres. The problem with traction control is if you run it at 100%, it is actually a lot slower than just keeping it on that balance. But look how much Michael Schumacher's run him down. I mean, this is Michael Schumacher just playing now again with Juan Pablo Montoya. Just runs straight up to the back of the car, puts him into the position, puts that red Ferrari, look again, right into the mirrors of Montoya's Williams, trying to distract the Colombian, trying to force him into making an error. Again, traffic just ahead as they come out of that, as Pedro de la Rosa, as they come out of the Aqua Minerale all the way up to the very Anti-Alta.
Yes, now Michael's backed off, but that was very interesting to watch, John, because normally Michael, if he gets anywhere near another car, will instantly back off, but he just thought, no, I want to sit here and watch what you're up to, Juan Pablo, and he just sat behind him, closed up to him, showed him how quick the Ferrari was by being able to close up the gap, sat there for a while, and then dropped away. It's all part of the psychological warfare that's going on between these two.
Yeah, now what I liked was the way, as they exited out of Piratella, he pulled across to the left to make sure that Montoya was under no doubt at all. Not only was it a Ferrari, but it was Michael Schumacher's Ferrari. And that's all part of the psychology and the strategy that Michael is so clever in using. Now, Juan Pablo Montoya will say, OK, look, I wasn't going quickly, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that, I didn't have the grip. It doesn't mean a thing, and in fact, I'm sure he'll just go back to the pits and say, well, that was a waste of time for Michael Schumacher, wasn't it? What do you think he's doing? Getting me on a bit of a loop or something?
Yeah, he is so laid back, isn't he? As Peter found talking to him earlier on today, very relaxed, very calm. And look at Takuma Sato banging over the curbs here.
He seems to like this circuit. He seems to like the ability to attack the curbs. He certainly, from the moment he got into his car on Friday morning, has been right on it. And again, looks really good first part of the Ravazza. Again, second part, a lot of hand movement from the young Japanese driver. He really works the steering wheel. The car's never comfortable. It's always sort of on that very ragged edge. Watch him into the chicane. Well, pretty good through there. Watch the opposite lock applied. No, good grip, good traction off the corner. Good effort from Sato, sixth quickest.
Yeah, he goes. Sato. Michael Schumacher is on another quick lap, by the way. He has stayed out there after he backed off. He's now going quickly once again, and in fact I can just see from our onboard coverage that he's got behind one of the Jaguars at the moment, so whether that will hold him up. It was De La Rosa. Onboard channel with Michael Schumacher at the moment as we're looking at Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Frentzen running well so far here today, doing a good job on the arrows, 10th fastest, but he's on a personal best here, and this could well improve his position as the track continues to dry out that little bit more lap by lap.
Well, we're just 6/10 of a second as the Jaguars think that might be De La Rosa's parked it. Yeah. It is. That's down in the exit of the Ravazza, and that looks like it's the end of the day for Pedro, or end of the session for Pedro De La Rosa. That car will be removed by the marshals in a slightly awkward place just to get one of those movable cranes to come and pluck that car up, take it away. A yellow flag down there. You see those two corners, the two Ravazzas. That's the second part. Well, they've done a good job. So they'd only done a very few number of laps, 22nd in fact, and just probably going out and trying to do something a little bit more than just sitting in the pits. They did have those set of dry tyres which they looked to be putting onto De La Rosa's car, and I wondered did they have second thoughts and put them back on, or was they in fact on a set of intermediates?
Well, he'll be very, very frustrated about that. De La Rosa sitting in the pits until that moment, and he hasn't actually set a time. That was going to be his first timed lap, so that is very disappointing indeed for Pedro de la Rosa. His teammate Eddie Irvine 21st, and he's only just setting his first time lap really at the moment as well.
I think both Jaguars just have been sitting it out. They haven't bothered going out, and so let's have a look and see what happens. There's Michael Schumacher coming round, and Pedro's probably come backwards. There he goes, backwards into the corner. Well, certainly, I mean, for a rally driver, that would have been the way you'd attack. And who's that? Is it Fisichella?
Yeah, that is Fisichella who's gone off. That's Aqua Minerale where he's taken a trip across, but he looks as though he's kept it running, which is good news. They're going very slowly at the moment. Now he seems to pick up the speed again.
Well, of course, his tyres have got a load of the gravel on them, and Fisichella probably, hopefully, trying to stay out of the racing line on the exit of Aqua Minerale. Now picks up a bit of speed. Whether he'll determine he needs to go back here, he's never in a month of Sundays, way off it. I think he just was so wide coming in through the first part of Aqua Minerale, he couldn't get the car tucked back in time. Probably trying to take a slightly more acute line to try and get a better exit out of Aqua Minerale. Paid the price, and well, we're looking into the eyes, but we can't see them because he's got a dark visor on.
Interesting looking at the relative tyre performances. It certainly looks as though with these intermediates that they're all running at the moment, rather than the full wets we saw yesterday, John, that Bridgestone have a bigger advantage in the intermediates perhaps than they did with the full wets, because the fastest of the Michelin runners is now in 8th place. That's Kimi Räikkönen. So Bridgestone's all the way down to 8th, including people like Panis and Villeneuve, who really haven't featured much over the last few races, and the gap 2.5 seconds between Michael Schumacher on his Bridgestones down to Kimi Räikkönen, fastest of the Michelin runners.
Might as well be 2.5 days. I mean, that's just an enormous amount of time. So we're looking to see whether Michael Schumacher on this lap, well, no, not this second intermediate split time, shows that it was just the most recent time. That was a 31.544. The best so far we've seen is a 31.076. But we're waiting to see the first driver to break through the 1 minute 30-second barrier, because we've got to look all the way down to David Coulthard's pole time of 1 minute 23.054 before we're going to see really times indicating the track is beginning to come back to the drivers, and all that moisture will be finally cleared away.
Well, let's see what Michael Schumacher does here. His middle sector not particularly quick, but it's not quite. Oh, and off goes Takuma.
Sato, yep. And that's a big old spin off from down at Aqua Minerale. He gets it onto the little service road. He's gone that far. He must have been, well, that on replay will be worth watching, because he certainly went pretty quick and pretty far. Now he's got to be very careful when he rejoins the track that there isn't any traffic coming on the exit of the corner.
Well, he certainly did that one properly, didn't he? Same place that his teammate went off a moment ago. Let's take a look here.
He'd just gone third quickest. Oh, that's right. I mean, he's just so quick in, no way to slow the car down. Fortunately, lots and lots of space for the Japanese driver to get back up onto... Oh, I mean, just he must have caught the right wheel on that curb. Just the attitude of the car, maybe slightly off throttle, and just too quick.
It's a fast section, that. They're in 4th gear at about 140 miles an hour through the first right-hander at Aqua Minerale, and he went off a long way.
Fisichella's second quickest, but Michael Schumacher still fastest. Probably en route to make now the first driver to break into that 1 minute 29s. Well, second sector didn't give us anything very special. But
yeah, he was only a fraction off, I think, on that second sector off his previous personal best. So
it's actually a thousandth of a second, in fact, so it wasn't that far. Just it came up in white, which is the most recent time. Not his personal best or the fastest of the day. So Michael Schumacher... Yeah, so it's not probably going to break unless on this third sector. This is where we saw Michael Schumacher so strong. He comes down into the chicane, and that's looking to see. It's probably going to be very marginal. I don't think he will break, and he's not going to do it. In fact, it's 1.1 seconds away. So whether he backed off or whether just maybe the set of tyres is on now after a run, he's completed 12 laps, and he's done most of those 12 laps, I think, on that original set of tyres. So they're probably just losing that edge. When he starts to really put pressure on them, lean into the car that little bit harder on the entry to a corner, it's just not there for him.
You can see Ralf Schumacher on those grooved dry weather tyres. People very much out on those now. And Michael Schumacher the fastest, Fisichella second, Barrichello third, Takuma Sato fourth. Despite going off a moment ago, before that he'd set a very quick lap. So Panis fifth, Heidfeld sixth, then Villeneuve, Massa, Bernaldi and Raikkonen now down in 10th place, with one or two people having improved. Dry weather tyres being used now by Ralf Schumacher, and let's just see how he gets on.
I think this is probably maybe very timely of the Williams BMW team, because we've just got 5.5 minutes of this session remaining. Everybody, all the spotters will be noting that Williams have sent out Ralf Schumacher on those grooved slicks. So what he will do in this first out lap, we have to see. But certainly when he gets into, he's done an out lap. This is actually first timed lap. 26.2 is the best he's done in that first sector, which is a second off his brother, and he's about the same amount in the second sector. So it's still not yet ideal for the grooved slick, but give him a couple of 3 laps and we might see Ralf Schumacher vault all the way up from where he currently resides, somewhere in 16th place. And in fact he's gone all the way to 5th, and he had the fastest time in that final sector. Watch this lap, we could see Ralf Schumacher quickest of all, and this will be his 9th lap.
Yeah, the tyre temperature is now beginning to come up. Let's watch him through the Tamburello chicane. Flicks one side then the other. We're also watching Montoya, who's just gone out as well on a set of dry weather tyres. Here comes the McLaren now of David Coulthard, also on the 4 groove tyres. So everybody now in the final moments of this first 45-minute session, getting ready to do some proper dry running, and we'll wait to see what Montoya does. Now at the moment he's just coming out really to establish a lap and get some tyre temperature up, and next lap should be a quick one.
Yes, this is his first, he's starting his first flying lap. Ralf Schumacher on those tyres where he's had 1 lap where we saw him quickest in that final sector, personal best currently in that first sector. So Ralf Schumacher clearly en route to improve from his 5th place, as Montoya will probably mirror every move that Ralf Schumacher makes.
Yes, this will certainly make them a bit happier as things begin to dry out, and they've got a bit more chance to show what they can do. Ralph's just gone around the 2nd sector and is still up reasonably well, and look at the intermediate times here for Montoya. A good first sector, although slightly slower than Michael's best to date. Despite what that said a second ago, Montoya won't, I don't think, yet eclipse Michael Schumacher's time.
So we're waiting for Ralf Schumacher to complete his lap. In fact, Ralf Schumacher goes up 1 place again, fastest in that final sector. It seems that the 3rd sector is the part of track in these conditions which dries quickest. Now, whether that's to do with the way the sun, the position of the sun in the sky is, or whether it's because a lot of it is falling away ground, so therefore the rain is dissipating more quickly than on the flat parts of the circuit. So we have to keep an eye on Juan Pablo Montoya. He's got the fastest in terms of speeds on both those sectors, but only personal bests in terms of times. But certainly he's currently 16th, and he will leap somewhat further up the field than he currently is.
Let's see, here he comes, about to cross the line. Montoya goes 2nd fastest to Michael Schumacher. The gap's on 0.8 of a second between them, or 0.6 of a second between them. But Montoya now, with the dry tyres on the car, showing much more pace, as we might expect. Barrichello's out there, so this will give us a good comparison perhaps of the Ferrari.
But Barrichello fastest in that first sector. Barrichello, let's get a look and see. He must surely be on now Bridgestone's grooved slick tyres. Waiting to see Michael Schumacher. We've only got 2 minutes and 16 seconds of this session remaining. Massa ahead of Barrichello, the 2 Brazilians. Barrichello will not want to have his progress impeded. Again, fastest in that 2nd sector. Now it's the run down to the Ravazza.
That looked great through there once again, and that Ferrari is riding the curb so well. The Williams seems to bobble a bit more when it goes over the curves, but this car looks very controlled, bobbling there because he's hitting it that much harder now in these dry conditions. Oh, and we've got one of the Williams off. Let's see, that's Montoya.
Montoya, yes, Adriano Aquaminerali, but we're keeping an eye on Rubens Barrichello, who is running up close to the back end. Barrichello, as he comes across the start-finish line, he's just slowed down. He got held up. Well, this is super slow-mo. No, it's not. I thought it was super slow-mo. He slowed right down because Felipe Massa impaired him on that lap. He didn't want to sort of spoil the lap, so he's going to get clear air once again, have another go, but we can see now just how quick Ferrari are, and Michael Schumacher sitting it out in the pits.
If you look at the data screen at the moment with all its flashing colours and numbers and gives you the times, right at the top of the data screen it gives you the theoretical fastest time. Coulthard's just gone fastest. The theoretical fastest time I was just about to say is actually a 1:28.063 at the moment, and Coulthard's just done a 1:30.3. The theoretical time made up of all the best sectors of drivers that have set times in this session. So the theoretical best is it's gone down to 1:27 in fact now, so 2.3 seconds or 2.5 seconds faster than anyone has actually gone on a lap is the theoretical best lap if you add everybody's best sector together.
And Barrichello has spun it. That's at Aqua Minerale on the exit. He looped it round. We're just seeing the tail end of that spin. He had been fastest in that first sector again. He's on the grass he's been on the grass more than Bob Marley, I think, the times he's spun this thing around.
And it looks as though he stalled it as well, John. So it looks as though it might be the end of the session, but with only a few seconds to go, it won't hurt him too much. Here comes Ralf Schumacher. Let's see whether there's any improvement. Well, yes, it does. It goes fastest. So into the 129s now, and suddenly the track drying out at the end of this session. And by the start of the next session, hopefully, we'll see times much more like we would expect.
Rubens, just park it, my friend.
I thought I saw some more dust.
There's Fisichella.
Yeah, Fisichella's gone off on the outside of the same corner. Oh dear, all over the place.
Ben, there was waved yellow flags down there. What Fisichella is doing, going off in a yellow flag zone, I do not know.
Barrichello's still got the engine running, actually. I thought he'd stalled it, but
he's got no grip. He's got dry tyres on, effectively dry tyres on. He might as well just park it. He's going to do the clutch no good at all. He gets outside assistance now. The session's finished anyway, so he can get outside assistance to drive back to the pits.
He hasn't done much off-roading, has he? He would have known that it would have been sensible to go down the hill and rejoin at the bottom rather than trying to go back up the hill.
Let's see Montoya. He goes quickest.
Fastest overall, beating his teammate Ralf Schumacher at the end of that free practice session. So, very interesting. As the track gets dry enough to run the dry weather tyres, suddenly Michelin come back to the top again. A Michelin 1, 2, 3 to finish the session in these almost dry conditions.
But Ben, what I think remains unanswered, would Barrichello, had he finished that lap, been quickest? I think he probably would have been. And Michael Schumacher, to our knowledge, never ever went out on a set of groove slicks. We saw his car in the garage with those intermediate tyres on. I wonder whether that was just something Ferrari decided to not get fussed about. They knew that Michael, given those tyres, would be clearly quickest, so they let Barrichello go out and do the practical test, almost be the sort of the sacrificial lamb, one might say.
Very interesting. We probably can't draw any conclusions, as you say, John, because it all depends on who was out there in the dying moments of the session. But it has to be said that the Michelin's dries looked pretty good, just starting to come in there towards the end of that free practice. And they now have a short break until it's time to come back out on track. Half an hour, and then they'll be back on track once again for their second 45-minute session. Just riding there with Ralf as he heads on round, and Giancarlo Fisichella is coming back on the motorbike to the pit lane.
Let's look at Rubens. Just comes down. What's he doing? Oh, just back end flicked out. I mean, whether it's just a little bit too much use of the power.
Very early, wasn't it? It was strange where exactly it flicked out. He was on intermediates. That's interesting to see, rather than being on the dry weather tyre too.
Well, let's have a look and see. There again, this is Fisichella.
That's the same place that Sato went off. He ran wide, didn't he, in the same place?
Yes, both come down. When you're coming down there quickly, you're sort of getting a sense that there's plenty of grip. The track looks reasonable at that point, but as we go to the Jaguar pits, Wolfgang Reitzler, the man that Niki Lauda was talking about, who actually drove the R3 Jaguar on the same day as Niki also drove the car with Pedro de la Rosa and Gunther Steiner. And interesting that Wolfgang Reitzler is turning up at races, which maybe indicates that the fortunes of the team are also on an upturn.
Well, certainly when you've got the Ford top brass turning up to see what's going on, it just shows the level of commitment, and perhaps just backing up the fact that they're saying, no, we're very much in this. We want to progress and move forwards despite the problems that the team has been having in the early part of this year with the performance of the car. So De La Rosa, of course, having to explain his way out of spinning on what was basically his first time lap. Irvine ended up second to last, I'm afraid, but he only did 5 laps. I think they just didn't really bother to do any laps in that session, and that's why the Jaguars are at the back. Let's take a look at the times. Can't read a lot into it because of the changing conditions, but Montoya and Schumacher will still be pleased that they're at the top for Williams BMW. Then David Coulthard, but Michael Schumacher was very fast. Every time he went out there, he looked breathtaking. So did Barrichello, despite that spin at the end. Ended up 9th, but was due to set a much faster time than that. Felipe Massa's attacking the place with gusto. He's 10th fastest currently, but one to watch this weekend. He's either going to do extremely well or have a big accident, and we'll just have to see which of those it is. Just behind them, Enrique Bernoldi in the Arrows, ahead of McNish. A better performance today in the Toyota. They really struggled to come up with a wet setup, but now it's drying out. They seem to be going a little quicker. Ahead of Sato, Heidfeld, Raikkonen quite a long way down, but he wasn't out towards the end of the session. Button and Trulli, I don't think either of those did a huge number of laps. Well, Button did 10 laps in that session. Heidfeld, in fact, only doing 5 laps, so didn't decide to do many laps.
And just looking at that 15 through 20, I suspect that They didn't go out and run on that dry tyre. They probably stayed with the intermediate, and that's why you've got that bar of Michelin teams from 16th down to 20th.
But it's great to see that little bit of extra sunshine that we've got today, and the track getting that much dry. It's interesting to see also how long it's taking out to dry, John. It's not drying in just a few moments. It's taking lap after lap after lap, and only gradually are the times coming down.
Well, and basically it's very simple. Two reasons. One, a lot of rain fell over the previous 2 days, and that has saturated the tarmac and also saturated the ground, so for the water to dissipate through the natural sort of system, it's going to take a long time. Secondly, well, we've now got some wind, that will help, but the ambient temperature, only 16 degrees, track up to 18, you need more ambient temperature. We're in the first of the European races. It traditionally is never that warm in San Marino for the Imola Grand Prix at this time of year, and having had that much rain fall over 2 days, the two things ain't going to happen just simply because cars are out on track. It needs a full day of no rain for that ambient temperature to rise up to maybe somewhere into the early 20s and track temperature to go up to maybe middle or high 20s to see any perceptible change in the track condition. And the prospect of that happening is not very high, but I have to say one thing, it bodes well for a fantastic qualifying session.
It does, an absolutely crucial qualifying session as well. Coming up a little bit later on today, you'll be able to watch full coverage with us here on Digital F1, the full interactive coverage, and we'll be able to see how that battle progresses. Felipe Massa at the back there, talking to Jackie Ecklard, the race engineer at Sauber, and just going through one or two changes perhaps to be made. But again, the drivers, John, presumably aren't going to be able to do an awful lot in terms of giving them feedback either after the change in conditions throughout that session.
No, there'll not be very much. It is a bit of a lottery, and I have to say I wish we had more of them.
Well, let's take a look back at some of the highlights from this changeable session of free practice this morning.